Welcome back to another episode of Viper Bytes. We are on to week 2. We got some Thursday night football action coming to you. Washington, New York Giants. Here we go. Is it just me or does it seem a bit of a letdown? We just had a fantastic Monday night football game. The Raiders, the Ravens. Did the Raiders win? Did they lose? Did they win again? Yes, it's all correct. Now, and this is coming off of the first Thursday night football game that we really got excited about last week. Dallas versus Tampa Bay. What a show that was. You had Dak slinging that ball around to Amari Cooper, to CeeDee Lamb, Tom Brady giving the ball up to Antonio Brown, and Gronk, like we were talking about the Patriots of yesteryears. But we are now talking about Washington and the New York Giants. So let's get right into it right now while we can. Now, a couple quick things here to talk about, what we got to think about when we're talking about the Giants and the Washington football team is the fact that the Giants, they're not very good. Let's be honest. I'll call it the way it is. I have a lot of friends who are Giants fans, so respect to you. I know what it feels like to have a team that's been struggling for years, so I definitely feel you right now. Now, the one ray of hope that you can be holding on to this game right now is Daniel Jones is 4-0 against the Washington Football Club. And the last time that they played, Daniel Jones threw for 267 yards, rushed for another 27, but they didn't score a whole heck of a lot. They only scored 13 points. Now, a little bit more insight into the numbers here that we're looking at. We call this predictive analysis the first couple weeks, trying to get an idea of what's going on, what kind of trends are going on. You know what? We'll talk a little bit deeper about the personnel that the Giants were using, but 67% of the time they were passing. That was 11th amongst all teams in week 1, where they only ran the ball 32.8%, give or take, which was 22nd. Now, a lot of that was due to the fact that Saquon Barkley was on a bit of a snap count. A lot of that was about the game script and how that was going. They faced the Denver Broncos last week. So, you know what? We got to look at all this. And New York is 1-4 against the spread in the last 5 games. I think that spread right now is 3.5 towards Washington. Now, let's talk a little bit more detail here about what we're dealing with when we're talking about the Giants. We'll get into Washington here in a little bit, but the Giants, it comes down to Duke product, Daniel Jones, and what he can do. He's been a turnover machine in his early start of his career. I think he's committed about 40 turnovers in 28 games. The second fastest quarterback to accomplish 40 turnovers, second only to Mark Bulger to reach that number. Saquon Barkley, week 1, 10 carries, 26 yards, 2.6 yards per carry. Washington held the Chargers to 3.1 yards per carry last Sunday. And for Barkley going from a Sunday game to a Thursday game, short notice, expect that snap count to continue there. I wouldn't be surprised if he had more than 15 touches this game. I would be surprised. A little bit further there into the quarterbacking here. Washington limited Justin Herbert to 337 yards and 1 passing touchdown for 15.4 fantasy points. Jones, in the 2 games last year, he got 324 yards, 2 passing touchdowns in those 2 games. So I'm not expecting a whole lot of offensive fireworks coming from the quarterback position for the New York Giants. Now, where I do like this team a little bit more is Sterling Shepard. Sterling Shepard is going to draw a tougher assignment there. He's going to get Kendall Fuller in this matchup. Now, talk about Sterling Shepard. He led the Giants with 9 targets. That's a 24% share of that, with 7 catches, 113 yards, 1 receiving touchdown against the Broncos last week. We talk about how good that Broncos secondary is, and they are legit. And I like Sterling Shepard. He's a fantastic player, very underrated, kind of like that unsung hero on your fantasy football squads. Now, he showed a little bit of a yak ability there on that 37-yard touchdown, and he's now posted a remarkable 6 catches in 9 of the last 13 games since 2020. He ran 65% of his snaps out of the slot last week. And what was effective for the Chargers against the Washington Football Club was that Keenan Allen posted a total of 9 receptions for 100 yards in that matchup. So there's definitely a chance for Sterling Shepard to have a good game here coming out of the slot. Now, Kenny Golladay, he's probably got the little bit of easier matchup there with Benjamin St-Juste, long corner, rangy. He can play. Don't kid yourself. Don't sell St-Juste here short, but early last week, it didn't look like he was really limited by that hamstring injury in that season opener. I think he ran 88% of the snaps of Jones's drops. He owned a 16% share as opposed to Sterling Shepard's 24. And when we look at that ADOT, 16.3 yards came on that 4 of 65 receiving. He's kind of sliding into, if you want to compare that to last week, he's kind of sliding into that Mike Williams role where Mike Williams also went for 8 receptions, 82 yards, and a touchdown, getting the 12 targets. So you can definitely attack these guys through the air, the Washington team through the air. We see now, I'm not comparing Sterling Shepard and Kenny Golladay to Keenan Allen and Mike Williams, but I think that's something you can expect to kind of see that kind of moving forward in this matchup. Now, we talked about how the Giants took care of this. We talked about how heavy they were in the passing game there at 67%. Well, they ran 11 personnel 75% of the time. And of that 75% of the time, Daniel Jones threw the ball 80% on those opportunities. So, you know what? If they're in 11 personnel, which they were 3/4 of the time last week, there's an 80% chance that Jones is going to drop back and throw that ball up in the air. Now, is that because he trusts Sterling Shepard and Kenny Golladay and these receiving weapons? Maybe. But I think that's more to say about what you can expect out of Saquon Barkley and that snap count that he's going to be definitely riding hard on this week. So another matchup, we're going to flip this over to the Washington team. Washington is 6-3 against the spread in the last 9 games. Last year, Washington was 7-9 in 2020. Their wins came against Dallas twice, Philly twice, but not against the opponent tonight. They did not get a single win against the New York Football Giants. How did they do it last week? More of a balanced attack than what you've seen of the Giants. 46% of their game plan came on the run, or came for the pass. Sorry, pardon me there, which was 31st in the league. So they were one of the fewest passing teams last week. And that might have something to do with Curtis Samuel being out. Curtis Samuel's probably not suiting up again tonight. I haven't checked the actual injury report yet. But they also ran the ball 52% of times, which was the second most, which says, you know what, Antonio Gibson, we believe in you. You're our bell cow. We'll talk about Antonio Gibson, how I feel about him going into this matchup in a little bit. Now, this is the second matchup last season. In the second matchup last season, Washington found a way to get to Daniel Jones. They sacked him 5 times. Chase Young was feeling it. Montez Sweat was getting at it. This is one of the more formidable defensive fronts in all the National Football League. Expect pressure to come again, which is going to make it more difficult to see that passing game, that short passing game from the Giants. They're going to really rely on that, especially with Barkley not being available or being limited. And Devontae Burkert not getting much run last week either, which was kind of a shocker considering everything. The biggest news there is Ryan Fitzpatrick for the Washington Football Club. He is on the IR. Insert Taylor Heinicke here. So Heinicke. Here we are where we're at. He got his first start last year, limited in the first game of the regular season against Carolina. Nothing really shocking there. But that second matchup against Tampa Bay in the playoffs, he played the eventual Super Bowl champs who had such a devastating pass rush. They gave Patrick Mahomes fits all game long. Heinicke in that game, 26 of 44, 306 yards, a 59% completion percentage, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. Heinicke can get it done. And how did he do this all? We'll talk about Logan Thomas a little bit, but there is that real connection between the two. In the first game there against Carolina, I think he saw 9 targets. Against Tampa Bay, 12 targets. So you can look for that connection to be hooking up early and often in here. Now, last week, when he came in and spelled Ryan Fitzpatrick after the hip injury, he went 11 for 15, 122 yards, 8.1 yards per attempt, and that 1 touchdown. He also threw in 17 yards rushing as well to show you that he could get it done on the ground. Now, when we take a look at the running game here, Gibson averaged 4.5 yards per carry against the Chargers, which is great. And the Giants, they gave up that huge run to Melvin Gordon. Melvin Gordon turned back the hands of time there a little bit, busted out a big 70-yard run. If you don't think Antonio Gibson has the ability to do that on any given play, I don't know what to tell you at this point right now. But look for Antonio Gibson to be able to bust out a big run here at some point in this game. Now, let's look a little bit more. Antonio Gibson played 65% of the snaps last week, handled the 20 carries, 90 yards rushing, 3 more receptions for 18 yards. He had 5 targets total. That's a 24% share of what we saw last week with Heinicke there and Fitzpatrick. The Giants there, going back to Melvin Gordon, Javonte Williams, 24 of 76 yards. It's a 3.2 yards per carry before that big run by Gordon. So they showed ability to stop the run. But Gibson, it's going to be, this defense, I think the Giants is very underrated. And I think Gibson is going to come out here to play. This is going to be a fun matchup to watch here. In the receiving game, Terry McLaurin, he's going to draw James Bradbury, who's one of the better defenders in the league. We want to talk about Terry McLaurin has had all kinds of quarterbacks in his tenure there in Washington. He's fun. He caught all 4 of his targets there. He had a 19% share in the target game there. And you know what? It all came from Heinicke. So we know that Heinicke is looking for Terry McLaurin. We know he's going to look for Logan Thomas. These are things that we know already going into this. Last year, McLaurin posted a 14 for 189 and 1 receiving touchdown in 2 games versus the Giants. While he had one of his better games there, not one of his better games, but his game with Taylor Heinicke there in the playoffs, he had 6 receptions for 75 yards in that game. So we know there's a rapport already built there between the two of them, between Heinicke. We know that Terry McLaurin's had success versus the Giants. You put the two together, I would expect a good week here from Terry McLaurin once again. We'll talk about where I see everyone shaking out here shortly. Logan Thomas, you know what? I just told you, 9 targets against Carolina with Heinicke there, 12 targets in the playoff game with Tampa Bay. You know he's going to be looked to often as a security blanket for the young quarterback. Now, he caught an 11-yard touchdown to salvage his week 1. He caught all 3 of his targets there for 30 yards. He's now posted double-digit fantasy points in 8 consecutive games, including the playoffs, with 4 touchdowns in that period of time. Denver's tight ends combined for, I think it was about 10 for 85 and 1 receiving. So we kind of look at this. There's an opportunity there to get some points. We saw how they were able to attack them last week, how the Giants and the Washington Football Club. So we know if the Giants are able to attack Denver there and produce a little bit of receptions and some yardage there, then Logan Thomas should have no problem as well. Now, the guy to watch in this matchup for me, and we'll talk about it again, is Dyami Brown. You know what? Not a good debut. By stats and numbers you want to look at. He had just a negative 2-yard catch last week, but he did have a catch. He also played 93% of the snaps and had 4 targets. Those 4 targets puts him at that 19% target share. And I think we could expect that very similar again this week. I think that he's comfortable in that system now. He's got another week under his belt. He's got a week of actual game action to kind of go with things. Look out for Dyami Brown to big off a big pass reception here in this matchup. KJ Hamler attacked this Giants defense last week, 3 for 41. And you know what? It's going to be fun. I think Dyami Brown has that big play potential anytime he touches the ball. Now, as far as what you can start, what not to start today, Daniel Jones, he kind of comes into that low-end quarterback too. If you have to start him, you could start him in a super flex. If you're in a 2 QB league, you're putting him in there. You're kind of tempering those expectations. And say with Taylor Heinicke here, you're going to be able to put him in as a QB2 or a super flex and hope for that upside. Because we've seen him in that playoff game against Tampa Bay have some success. And I think here's the thing. Once he gets in that lineup here to this week and he balls out like I think he's going to, Ryan Fitzpatrick might not have a job to come back to. He might have just got himself Wally Pipped or Drew Bledsoe or however you want to call it or whatever you want to look at it. I think Heinicke may be the quarterback of the now and of the future for Washington until draft season starts. At running back, Barkley is no better than a flex. I'm sorry. You put the things all together, short week, 2.6 yards per carry, snap count. I've went on record here on Twitter earlier. I'd rather start a Kenneth Gainwell for the Eagles this week than I would for Barkley. He's no more than a flex. And even at that, I'm probably, if I'm putting him in the flex position, I'm seeing what wide receivers I could put in there. Now, Gibson, on the other hand, low end, RB1. We've seen him have those 20 carries, those 5 targets. We know he's going to have the bell cow. He's going to be on the field. He's going to have plenty of opportunities against the New York Giants here. So make sure you get Gibson in there. Book it here now. Sterling Shepard, I'm higher on him more than most people. I'll be honest here. Full disclosure. And you know what? I give him wide receiver 2 here. 5+ targets, 11 straight games, 3 straight 20-point fantasy, 3 straight games of 20 or more fantasy points. That is the second best streak behind only Christian McCaffrey's 8 games. So Sterling Shepard is looking to ball out tonight, and he's got that opportunity. He's got that tough coverage assignment like we mentioned earlier with Kendall Fuller. Now, on the flip side, Terry McLaurin, wide receiver 2, tough draw versus Bradbury. He's going to have an opportunity to get free, but for all intents and purposes, you know what? You're putting him in your lineup. You're going to put him in as a wide receiver 2, but temper those expectations a little bit. Could he bust one off? Absolutely. He's that good. But James Bradbury is no slouch himself. For my FFIDP people out there, they know what James Bradbury can do. Kenny Golladay, wide receiver 3, flex option as well. You're looking at him as a wide receiver 3. You're like, okay, what can you do? We've seen what Mike Williams did in this matchup here last week. Maybe we can expect something very similar for Kenny Golladay. I would expect something around those lines that we mentioned, that give or take, say, 7 receptions for 90 yards, and let's throw a touchdown in there for Kenny Golladay. So you're going to get a very serviceable week out of him. Now, Logan Thomas is the next wide receiver up, so to speak. We've seen that chemistry with Heineke. We've talked about his target share with Heineke in the lineup. Expect that to continue. Look for that security blanket to be there, especially in PPR. Logan Thomas is a tight end 1 this week, and he could challenge for the overall tight end 1. We might have the best tight end matchup going forward here right off the get-go. As far as tight ends go for the Giants, don't even look at it. Kyle Rudolph, no. Caden Smith, no. Evan Ingram is out, and that's exactly where you should leave that Giants tight end room tonight. Out. Now, of course, I'm going to put Dyami Brown as a sleeper here. I think he's got the potential to bust out a big one. Look for 2 big plays from Dyami Brown. I'm going to put on my little, my buddy there, Major Caldwell, calls himself Major Domus right now. I'm going to put that little hat on there, maybe do a little focusing here, a little predictive analysis. I think Dyami Brown gets loose twice in this matchup for big yards. Let's call it 3 receptions for 85 and a touchdown. That's how I'm looking at this matchup this week. And I think Washington covers. I think Washington's going to go in to this matchup knowing, hey, you know what? Daniel Jones has beat us 4 straight times. We got to get something right here. Let's get this pass rush going. This pass rush is going to get coming at them. It's coming at them hard. They're not going to be able to slow down this pass rush because they're not going to be able to get that screen game going with no Saquon Barkley or him on a snap count here on that short turnaround. I think this is going to be one of those games that Washington takes big time. They're going to cover that 3.5-point spread, and it's going to be fun to watch. It's football. We're happy to have football back, but you know what? After last Thursday night football, it's going to be a bit of a downer for us. So either way, you know what? Football's back, and this is our Thursday night football preview. New York Giants, Washington football team. Get ready for some football because we're about to kick it all off in week 2 in only a few minutes. Catch you next week. Bye.